Honorable Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, Dr. Akiwumi A. Adesina, President of the African Development Bank Group, His Excellency Mr. Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal, His Excellency Mr. Patrice Talon, President of the Republic of Benin, His Excellency Mr. Daniel Kablan-Duncan, Vice President of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, Honorable Arun Jaitley, Minister of Finance of India and the Chairperson of the Board of Governors of the African Development Bank Group, Honorable Vijaybai R. Rumpani, Chief Minister of the State of Gujarat, Dr. Anthony M. Maruping, Commissioner for Economic Affairs of the African Union Commission, representing the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Dr. John Dramani Mahama, former President of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Willie Bett, Minister of Agriculture of Kenya, representing the President of the Republic of Kenya, Honorable Ministers of the Government of India, Honorable Members of Parliament, Honorable Ministers of the State of Gujarat, Honorable Governors of the African Development Bank, dear former Presidents of the African Development Bank, Honorable Special Guests, Excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, Honorable Alternate Governors of the African Development Bank, dear Executive Directors of the African Development Bank Group, dear Vice Presidents and members of the AFDB Senior Management Team, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to the annual meetings of the African Development Bank Group, which is the 52nd annual meeting of the African Development Bank and the 43rd annual meetings of the African Development Fund. My name is Vincent Mehele. I'll be the Master of Ceremony for this occasion. Before we begin, I'd like this moment for the IT systems people to show us a video.
Modern energy is critical to Africa's growth, progress, and prosperity, which is why in 2016, the African Development Bank committed $12 billion over 5 years with a goal of leveraging $45 to $50 billion in public-private partnerships. Welcome to Ouarzazate, nicknamed the door to the desert. This plateau of sand dunes in the middle of Morocco's desert has approximately 330 days of sunshine a year. It's a perfect location for Noor, the world's largest solar park owned by Mazen, the Moroccan Agency for Sustainable Energy, and operated by developers and partners such as Aqua Power. Noor made history in 2016 when it commissioned the world's first concentrated solar power plant with a capacity of 160 megawatts. Part funded by the African Development Bank, the Noor complex will have a capacity of 2,000 megawatts in 2020 and reduce CO2 emissions by 500,000 tons a year.
Dans le cadre d'une ambition réaliste, il ne s'agit pas d'un projet, il s'agit d'un véritable plan d'action dans le cadre d'une vision qui s'appuie sur une volonté de doter le pays d'une stratégie énergétique durable qui permet de satisfaire les besoins croissants, je dirais même exponentiels.
In the first 3 years alone, the North Solar Complex will employ 3,000 temporary workers during the construction phase and 300 permanent staff. Many of them are young professionals like Nadia.
This project has allowed me to reach my professional expectation and also to meet my husband because we can really contribute to the development of our hometown and still here in Ouarzazate.
For Africa's 1.2 billion people, rural communities are home to almost 2/3 of the population. For most, culture is the main source of livelihood. Even though Africa contains 65% of global uncultivated land, the continent is a net importer of food, $35 billion a year. Jibi Mbaye grew up in one of the rural communities around Lake Weirs, Senegal's main freshwater reserve, which provides 60% of drinking water needs for the capital, Dakar.
92 ba léegi man maa ngi fi déplacé wu benn année am na ñoo xam ni dëkk bi genn wàll gépp dem nañu si gaal yi Espagne am na ñoo xam ni ñu ngi Dakar am na ñoo xam ni ñu ngi woon Mauritanie bi ñu demee ba nga xam ne nag olaat dugg na moto pompe yi commencé ñëw ñu yokk ñu gas ay canal ñu teg ay moto pompe léegi boobu ñu ngi doon def 50 hectares par année dégg nga bi olaat duggee ñu continuer si noonu di continuer si noonu ba fi may waxaat teeg yow nii ñoo ngi si 2000 hectares yoo xam ni ñu ngi koy liggéey ci lan.
Thanks to a loan of almost 11 billion CFA provided by the African Development Bank, the hydrological conditions of the lake have improved significantly. Today, 50,000 people in 113 villages have access to drinking water and water which can meet their agricultural and domestic needs. Meeting Africa's energy and infrastructure needs is critical to the continent's economic and social transformation. Ethiopia has taken advantage of the bank's commitments and is running full steam ahead with an industrialization policy that could see it emerge as a middle-income country within 10 years. The Durban Cement Company on the outskirts of the capital is a major beneficiary of African Development Bank funding.
We chose the best technology, and we didn't build it for the present, we built it for the future, thinking of the next generation. It is the most environmentally friendly project or cement project in Ethiopia.
Until its commissioning in 2012, it was not uncommon for construction projects to be delayed by as much as a year or two due to cement importation restrictions.
Before Durban, the construction industry was suffering. This time, if we order cement from Durban, you get it maybe on site, on your site, in 3-4 days.
With an installed production capacity of 8,000 tons a day, Durban Midrock is helping meet 100% of the country's cement needs and exporting to nearby countries.
If we're going to become sustainably wealthy in Africa, it means that Africans have to own what they produce. The growth has to benefit Africans, and that's what the Durbas, supported by the likes of the ADB, have done. Incredible institutions, sophisticated companies, developing ecosystems around them.
Today, the last 200-kilometer stretch of the Trans-Africa Highway 4, otherwise known as the Cape to Cairo Highway, is nearing completion in Tanzania. Working closely with Tanzania's Road Infrastructure Authority, TANROADS, the African Development Bank is investing heavily in infrastructure projects, including highways and one-stop border posts that will accelerate the movement of people, goods and services across Africa.
Kiwango cha lami kilivyokamilika tunachukua muda wa siku moja, siku mbili. Masuala ya usafiri yamekuwa yameturahisishia na hata ulaji wa mafuta barabarani umekuwa umepungua.
Eta Mohango is a local fish entrepreneur in Monkey Bay, Malawi. As a beneficiary of a local economic development center and a fish landing site funded by the African Development Bank, she could easily be speaking for millions of other African women and rural poor.
Ndipo ndakhala moyo ovutika ndi ana 6 amene ndinaberekerana nawo. Ndipo amene kunapezeka kuti anabwera LED project. Project imene iyi inatiphunzitsa maphunziro osiyana-siyana kudzera mu LDF. Ndipo zitachitika izizi maphunziro amene tinalandira ndiwo okhuzana ndi imene tingasamalire nsomba, ndiwo okhuza amene tingapakirire, ndipo amene tingasungire ndrama ku mabanki. Nditasintha moyowo ninapeza ndrama zambiri ndipo ninamanga nyumba, ndaphunzitsa ana anga 4 amene anamaliza sekondari yawo, ndagula mbuzi 5.
In country after country, the African Development Bank's investment in its High Five development goals is showing tangible signs of transformation. Through multiple partners and stakeholders, the African Development Bank continues to play a strategic role in laying solid foundations for Africa's tomorrow.
Thank you very much. We'll now continue with our program. I call upon Honorable Aaron Jaitley, Governor of the African Development Bank Group for India and Minister of Finance of the Republic of India, as well as the Chairperson of the Board of Governors, to deliver his welcome statement.
Honorable Prime Minister, Excellencies, Heads of Government, Governors of the African Development Bank, Heads of Delegations, President Edicinia, my ministerial colleagues, Honorable Members of Parliament, Ministers of the Gujarat Government, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I welcome you all to the land of the Mahatma, the greatest ever bridge between India and Africa, in a venue and a city named after him. We are indeed privileged and honored to host the 52nd annual meeting of the African Development Bank. Leaders in this room today represent the voice and aspirations of 1/3 of humanity. I'm sure that this event will build on the success of the 3rd summit of the India-Africa Forum held in 2015 and will further cement the relationship between India and the countries of the African continent. We meet here at rather uncertain and challenging time. On the one hand, after a prolonged period of slow growth, the world economy is finally on a mend. Global growth is projected to rise from 3.1% in 2016 to 3.5% in 2017 and 3.6% in 2018. The economic activities are finally picking up with a long-awaited cyclical recovery in the investment, manufacturing, and trade. On the other hand, there is an increasing possibility of disruption in the global economy due to the inward-looking policies of some advanced countries. This has a danger of fritting away much of the gains from globalization. Having recently attended the spring meetings of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C., I have come back with a mixed feeling. Throughout this challenging time, India has remained a bright spot amongst the major economies. As per the IMF's assessment in January 2017, India is expected to grow at 7.2% and 7.7% in 2017 and 18, respectively. We have successfully implemented a slew of reform measures, including one of the largest currency reform initiatives ever implemented, which will move the Indian economy to a less cash trajectory, increase tax compliance, and reduce the threats of counterfeit currency. Other major initiatives include reforms in the budget process, passage of the landmark Goods and Services Tax Bill, enactment of the Comprehensive Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, liberalization of the FDI policy initiatives, and various facilitation measures to improve the attractiveness and competitiveness of India globally. Africa has been doing well recently on the economic frontier. I stand here with the conviction that the 21st century will not only be Asia's century alone, it will belong equally to both Asia and Africa. The African continent is transforming rapidly. Amidst tough global scenario, African economies have grown by 2.2% in 2016 and are expected to grow by 3.4% in the current year. The middle class in Africa is expanding, and so is urbanization. The African cities become vibrant places to live in. Aspirations and spending ability of the population are also increasing. This will open up new opportunities. Africa is approaching an exciting time. India and Africa should navigate through this journey together and shape their common future. India's development partnership is based on the principles of South-South cooperation and voluntary partnership. It is demand-driven and devoid of any conditionalities. We leave it to our partners to decide their priorities. These are very cornerstones of our policy, and we believe that this is the most enduring model of taking a partnership forward. Our increasing commitment to Africa is reflected in the continued high-level political engagement between the including the three India-Africa Forum summits, last of which was held in 2015. It is no coincidence that our President, Vice President, the Prime Minister together have visited 16 African countries in the recent past. There is not a single country in the African continent that has not been visited by one of my cabinet colleagues, and I am proud of this fact. The concessional line of credit of US $10 billion announced by the Honorable Prime Minister during the third India-Africa Summit builds on a series of cooperations in the areas of agriculture, healthcare, educational exchange, and manufacturing. Our Exim Bank has extended 152 concessional lines of credit amounting to a total of US $7.6 billion in 44 countries. All but 5 LOCs amounting to US $7.51 billion are extended and guaranteed on behalf of the Government of India. Let me now say a few words about our long association with the African Development Bank. India joined the African Development Fund in 1982 and the African Development Bank in 1983. It has been a long and fruitful journey since. India's collaboration with the bank is built around the three main pillars: contribution to the general capital increase, contribution to the ADF replenishment, and a bilateral trust fund providing resources to support a highly indebted poor countries and the multilateral debt reduction initiative. India has contributed to all the general capital increases of the bank. For ADF 14th replenishment cycle, India has pledged a US $14.5 million each as grant and bridge loan. It is in this spirit of continued partnership that we are hosting the 52nd annual meeting of the bank, the first of such summits on Asian soil. This summit not only provides an opportunity to governors and other delegates to dwell upon the challenges confronting us, it would also be an opportunity for India and Africa to further deepen our ties. The theme of the annual meeting, Transforming Agriculture for Wealth Creation in Africa, is an apt one. Agriculture is critical to economies of the African nations as also to the Indian economy. Africa is home to 60% of the arable land in the world, which produces only 10% of the global food outputs. This points to a huge potential in agricultural sector that has remained unlocked. India presents a contrasting picture where we have to support 17% of the world population with 2% of the world land mass. But we have met this challenge successfully, and there is a significant scope for an agricultural sector in Africa to benefit from the Indian experience. Also, with the changing global landscape for agriculture and food security, India and Africa can emerge as key partners in this area. Areas of cooperation can include irrigation practices, post-harvest and export infrastructure, farm mechanization for soil health and water management, food processing technologies, pulse production, and meeting pulses security and contract farming. Let me also say a few words about the High Fives agenda of President Adesina. As we have all noted, India and Africa have similar changes. As I go through the bank's High Fives, Light Up and Power Africa, Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of people of Africa, I cannot but feel that these are our agendas. For instance, our flagship Make in India program is no different from Industrialize Africa, or our Power for All and the ambitious push for renewable energy is reminiscent of the Light Up and Power Africa. I am convinced that the potential horizon of India-Africa collaboration is expanding. The India-Africa collaboration sessions are being held at the sidelines and will no doubt translate into many concrete cooperations and partnerships. I conclude with the firm belief that Africa-India collaboration will get stronger in the days to come. Indian Ocean might separate us geographically, but partnership and collaboration will be the modern bridge between the two ancient civilizations, with the bank being the strongest pillar. I urge you all to join this partnership. Thank you very much.
We will now have a short video address by Bill Gates.
Your Excellencies, President Adesina, it's a pleasure to help open this year's annual meeting. As the largest African-led source of development finance, the African Development Bank is an engine of growth for Africa's people. This is especially critical in the tough global environment that puts the continent's progress at risk. It's also fitting that this discussion is in India, given India's own experience setting its development agenda. Global partnerships like this one are a powerful way to move Africa forward. That's why I'm very excited about the collaboration our foundation has built with the bank and about the work we're doing together with many of your governments. Whether it's agriculture, health, nutrition, sanitation, or financial inclusion, these initiatives use smart financing to help give Africans the tools they need to lift themselves out of poverty. Just yesterday, the bank's African Leaders for Nutrition Network highlighted the importance of gray matter infrastructure as an engine for economic growth. Malnutrition robs children of their future, and it costs African economies $25 billion every year. Similarly, agriculture has the potential to be a huge driver of prosperity. Today, Africa spends $50 billion a year on food imports. Yet with existing innovations, a smallholder farmer could double her yields. Each goal needs resources, and I know bank leadership is looking at ways to maximize every dollar and to focus on areas where it's hardest getting financing from other sources. This meeting is a great opportunity to take this discussion forward. I look forward to hearing about your progress.
I will now invite Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank Group to deliver his keynote speech.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Good morning. Suprabhat. Your Excellency Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, Your Excellencies President Macky Sall of Senegal, President Talon of the Republic of Benin, Vice President Daniel Kablan-Duncan of Côte d'Ivoire, former President of Ghana, John Mahama, the Commissioner of Economic Affairs of the African Union, Dr. Marumping, representing the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, representative of the President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya, Minister William Bett, the Chief Minister of Gujarat, Mr. Vijay Rupani, and we are delighted today, me as President of the Bank, to always have former Presidents of the African Development Bank here with us, and we have three of them here with us today. We have former President Babaka Ndiaye, former President Kabaj, former President Fordwell. Thank you very much, former Presidents, for being with us today. Honorable Ministers, Governors of the African Development Bank, Executive Directors of the African Development Bank, Central Bank Governors, business leaders, civil society, farmers, agribusiness leaders, media partners, Africa's youth, senior management and staff of the African Development Bank, distinguished guests, partners, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, my own lovely wife, Grace, is here with us. And, you know, Mr. Prime Minister, I can tell you I won't be standing here. I certainly won't be President of the African Development Bank without that lovely lady sitting over there. Welcome to the 2017 annual meetings of the African Development Bank Group. This beautiful facility where we are having the meeting today was actually built in 182 days, I was told by Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister, there is a personal reason why I am delighted to be back in India. I started my international career in India in 1988 while being a Rockefeller Foundation Social Science Research Fellow at the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics ICRISAT in India, in Hyderabad, India, and the Director General, I think the current one, is also here today. We are all pleased to be here in this beautiful city of Ahmedabad, the home of Mahatma Gandhi, the land of vibrant Gujarat. Its uniqueness lies beyond being a smart mega city. It's based on its being the center of Indian independence. The famous Salt March and the Quit India movements that led to independence in 1947 were held right there in Ahmedabad. So from right here, through this annual meeting, will arise a new spirit of renewal and determination for Africa's accelerated growth and development. Let me thank you, Prime Minister Modi, for hosting this meeting, and the Minister of Finance, Arun Jaitley, and your staffs, and of course the bank staff as well, for your excellent efforts. I know it's hot out here, but I can tell you that the warm hospitality that you've given us even beats the heat. Thank you very much. The success of Gujarat is simply incredible. It has universal access to electricity, no power outages. Rural areas have 24 hours power every single day, 7 days a week. 90% of the world's rough diamonds are cut and polished right here in the state of Gujarat. That's industrialization. Its economy is diversified with vibrant service sectors. Its agriculture is prosperous. It creates jobs, and in fact, the state of Gujarat has an unemployment rate of less than 1%. It has some of the world's best medical centers, and many Africans come here for medical treatments. And because of its vast shoreline, it is key for economic integration of India. So, Gujarat has done essentially the high fives. No wonder Chief Minister Modi, who used to be the Chief Minister of Gujarat, left here to become the Prime Minister Modi. So let's give him a high five. Prime Minister Modi, you are in very good company today. With the dynamism of presidents from Africa that are here today, with uncommon zeal, President Macky Sall is transforming Senegal. President Ouattara, represented by his dynamic vice president, remains resilient and spurring remarkable economic growth in Côte d'Ivoire. And President Talon, a businessman, has already unleashed a wave of economic reforms in Benin. When leaders rise up, things happen. Just like Gujarat, Africa is sparkling today with the world's largest concentrated solar power plant in Morocco and Africa's largest wind power in Kenya. There's a lot Africa and India can share together, especially from Gujarat, because there are so many Gujaratis in Africa. I hear that the people of Ahmedabad, trade and business is in your blood. And when I was speaking to Prime Minister Modi, he reminded me that in Africa we have so many tukawalas in Africa, and that most of those tukawalas are actually from here. And so, Prime Minister Modi, you yourself, you are so passionate about trade and investments. I don't know about you, but I told Prime Minister I like his jacket, which is the Modi jacket, and I bought 2 of them. And I think it's the greatest export. And I don't know how Prime Minister Modi does it. He goes around the world, he fills stadiums with people listening to him. I think it's the greatest export that India has. It's in the blood. Your successful India-Africa summit reinforces the need to boost trade, investment, education, and economic partnerships. Well, Africa is the place to be. Despite challenging times occasioned by global economic recession, Africa continues to post resilient growth. Growth will pick up from 2.2% last year to 3.4% this year. These averages hide exceptional growth performance of many countries. In 2016, 12 countries grew at over 5%, and 20 countries grew by 3 to 5%. Africa's head is above waters in rising waters of global recession. Africa remains resilient, but we must move quickly to unlock greater growth rates that will substantially drive down poverty and support faster diversification of African economies. Confidence in Africa and its potential is what drives our work at the African Development Bank. The new kick in our steps for Africa comes from our high fives: Light Up and Power Africa, Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. These high fives will accelerate Africa's development. Don't just take it from me. The United Nations Development Programme's independent analysis and report shows that if Africa simply focuses on these high fives, Africa will achieve 90% of the Sustainable Development Goals and 90% of Agenda 2063. The distance between vision and reality is measured in actions. We need to accelerate action on these high fives. Africa's future must not continue to get postponed way into the future. That's why the bank is concentrating on accelerating its investments in Africa. In 2016, we approved $10.5 billion, the highest in the history of the bank. We disbursed $6.5 billion, also the highest ever in the history of the bank. The bank is delivering for Africa, and we are ready to do more. Let me summarize what we have achieved as a group in 2016 alone in what I call action units. 3.3 million Africans benefited from new electricity connections. 3.7 million Africans benefited from improved access to water and sanitation. 5.7 million Africans benefited in terms of support from agriculture. 9.7 million Africans benefited in terms of access to better healthcare services, and 7 million Africans benefited in terms of access to improved transport. We did all this while implementing major institutional reforms to improve our institutional efficiency and effectiveness. We have rolled out our new development and business delivery model, and 5 regional business development and delivery officers have been approved by our board of directors. Directors generals and deputy director generals for all these offices have been appointed. I am pleased to let you know that 80% of the deputy director generals are women. I firmly believe in the importance of women in senior leadership. I've never seen a bird that flies with only one wing. A bird flies only with 2 wings. And when Africa gets women equality right, it will move faster than it is moving today. We have approved the opening of new offices in Benin Republic, in Niger, and in Guinea. So President Talon, who is here with us today, will be one of our new hosts, and we are grateful to you, Mr. President, for your support. Thank you very much. The focus of this year's annual meeting is on our second high five, Feed Africa. There is no better place to have that discussion than right here in India. The Green Revolution turned India from depending on the largest of others to a food self-sufficient nation and now a global powerhouse in food. And it took just 3 years to turn all of that around. It was not a miracle. It was political will mixed with resolve to develop with dignity. To develop with pride, Africa must feed itself. Africa's food import bill stands at $35 billion a year and is estimated to grow to $110 billion a year if we do nothing by 2025. This obviously has negative consequences on macroeconomic and fiscal stability. Africa must rise up quickly and unlock the full potential of its agriculture. Africa has 65% of the uncultivated arable land left in the world to feed 9 billion people by 2050. So, what Africa does with agriculture today will determine the future of food in the world. The key is to turn Africa's natural comparative advantage in agriculture into a competitive advantage. We must accelerate access to high-quality seeds, fertilizers, irrigation, mechanized services, and finance, and agriculture must be taken as a business all across Africa. The needs of industrializing the agriculture is so important, and therefore Africa must industrialize that sector to unlock wealth. To achieve this, Africa needs to establish staple crop processing zones and agro-industrial zones, fully enabled with physical infrastructure to attract private agribusinesses to locate in rural areas, create market pool for produce of farmers, and reduce high post-harvest losses in the supply chains. By doing so, we will turn rural areas in Africa, in many places, from zones of economic misery to zones of economic prosperity. We will be able to empower African countries to add greater value for what they produce. Our massive cotton production will translate into textiles and garments. After all, the price of apparels never goes down, even when the price of cotton declines. That's why we are pleased to showcase Fashionomics session at this annual meeting. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Africa produces 75% of the world's cocoa, but it receives only 2% of a $100 billion annual chocolate market. African farmers sweat while others eat sweets. While the price of cocoa has hit an all-time low, profits of global manufacturers of chocolates have hit an all-time high. It's time to process Africa's cocoa in Africa, for we must end Africa being at the bottom of global value chains. We are taking action. That's why the African Development Bank has rolled out its Feed Africa Hi-Fi strategy, and we have committed to investing $24 billion in agriculture over the next 10 years. That is 400% increase in terms of our annual spending in the sector. We are investing in companies like East Africa Export Trading Group, which provides market access for millions of farmers. We have developed what we call technologies for African agriculture transformation, a new technology platform that would take technologies to millions of farmers all across Africa. And you have all heard from Bill Gates. We've just launched together with others the African Leaders for Nutrition to help address the high malnutrition and stunting levels in Africa. But these efforts will only succeed if Africa improves access to electricity. As we resolve Africa's access to electricity, agro-industrialization will take off in Africa, boosting rural economies, creating jobs for the youth, and lifting millions out of poverty. We are taking action. That's why the bank is investing $12 billion in the power sector in the next 5 years and leveraging $50 billion from the private sector. We have moved very quickly to set up the Vice Presidency for Power, Energy, Climate, and Green Growth, and recruited world-class staff. In 2016, the bank invested $1.7 billion in energy, and we leveraged $2.5 billion. Our last-mile power connection work in Kenya is linking 1 million people to electricity. We led the syndication of $965 million AB syndicated loan for South Africa's utility that's called Eskom, the largest in Africa's history. We provided energy sector reform budget support of $1 billion to Algeria, and we are very proud of our work with Algeria. Our support last year provided 22,000 kilometers of distribution lines. The bank hosts the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative, co-developed with the African Union, with commitments of $10 billion by G7 countries, including the European Union. We are very delighted with Prime Minister Modi's launch of the International Solar Alliance, and we look forward to the establishment of the India-Africa Energy Co-Financing Facility between the government of India and the African Development Bank. And I would like you to please put your hands together and thank the Prime Minister for helping us in this particular direction. Climate change is affecting Africa very badly. East and Southern Africa have been hit by droughts, costing many lives and putting over 20 million people at the risk of famine. It's the worst humanitarian disaster since 1945. But we are taking action. Our board of directors, of executive directors, and they work enormously hard, have recently approved the framework for our Say No to Farming campaign for a comprehensive response, which will provide short, medium, and long-term support of $1.1 billion eventually to South Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Nigeria. We've got to build climate resilience for Africa. The promises made to Africa on climate adaptation must be kept, not dismissed or unpaid. Adaptation to climate change is what is needed, not adaptation to the promises that were made. Well, something else is changing in Africa and how we organize our annual meetings at the African Development Bank. Africa's youth, now our largest constituency, are very well represented here. If you're the youth and you're here, please, I would like you to rise so we can welcome you, because you are now our greatest constituency at the bank. Please welcome all our young people that are here with us at the bank. The youths are not only the future of Africa, but they are also the present of Africa. Therefore, we must make their present prosperous and their future even brighter, much brighter. Africa's youth population will rise from 434 million to 840 million by 2050, and Africa will become the youngest region of the world. 38 out of the 40 countries that will be the youngest in the world will be in Africa. The median age of Africans will be 25 by that time. This is a huge demographic asset, which, if well tapped and well trained, will make Africa the talent center of the future. But today, their situation is not prosperous. 1/3 of them are unemployed or discouraged. 1/3 is in vulnerable employment, and only 1 out of 6 of them is in wage employment. If we can cut back the unemployment rate of the youths to the same as the adults, African economies will grow by between 10 to 20%. We will reduce the number of 1 million migrants from Africa to Europe in 2016 alone, some 160,000 alone to Italy, and avoid 5,000 young people whose future now lies buried at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. And I do not believe that the future of African youth lie at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Africa's youth unemployment rates stares us in the face, stirs up our conscience, and calls us to action. Africa's youth don't need handouts. They need support to spark their creativity and unleash their entrepreneurship. We are taking action. That's why the bank launched the Jobs for Africa's Youth, designed to support Africa to create 25 million jobs for youths and impact 50 million youths within 10 years. Making agriculture cool for the youth is a key part of our action plan. That's why we invested $800 million in 2016 to support 50,000 young commercial farmers and agribusiness entrepreneurs in 8 countries. Some of them are also here in this room today. They are the future for Africa's agriculture. Our job at the African Development Bank is to bank on Africa's future. We will trust the youths. We will support their dreams. We will spark their creativity, and we will enable their entrepreneurship. We will do more as our resources expand, for we cannot wait to give hope for millions of Africa's youth. To do more for Africa, its economies, its youth, and women, the bank needs a lot more resources. That's why it will be critical to begin discussions on how we will recapitalize the African Development Bank. The German Minister for Development and International Cooperation, Gerd Müller, got it right when he said, and I quote him, "The African Development Bank is the voice for Africa. It should be given resources to do more for Africa. A recapitalized bank will be able to deploy resources to meet the rapidly rising needs of a continent so thirsty for development. It will allow the bank to deliver on its high fives and allow Africa to meet 90% of its sustainable development goals. The high fives form the best deal for Africa's development. But fast-tracking Africa's development also means fast-tracking private investments. For those of you that are here today with business in your blood, let me make the case for investments. Think of a continent that will have the same population as India and China taken together by 2050. Think of a continent with rapidly rising middle class, rapid urbanization, and that will have the youngest population on Earth by 2050. Think of a continent where consumer spending is projected to reach $1.4 trillion in the next 3 years, and business-to-business spending to reach $3.5 trillion in the next 8 years. Think of the continent that accounted for 30% of global business and regulatory reforms in 2016. Don't look far. Think Africa. To help unlock massive investments in Africa, we are taking action. I am pleased to announce that the African Development Bank will be launching later this year the Africa Investment Forum. This will be a totally transactional forum that will be all about making deals happen and fast-tracking investments in Africa by pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance funds, and other institutional investors. So, Africa's huge investment opportunities beckons to you, from agriculture to agribusiness to energy to infrastructure and financial services. And the African Development Bank and its partners will be there to help you advance your investments. Let's move forward to a greater Africa. Let's together accelerate Africa's development. Africa's greater future is for the bold. Yes, we have challenges, but we will overcome them. As John Legend said in his song, if you are out there, the future was yesterday and we are already late. So let's give Africa the high fives and let's strongly support the African Development Bank to get the job done. I wish you a fruitful and enjoyable annual meeting. Thank you very much. Dan Yavad.
Indeed, to be able to have the high fives that Africa needs, the African Development Bank needs to be able to move across Africa to enable that to happen. As a result of that, the African Development Bank had started the initiative of revamping its travel document, the Laissez-Passer. Article 56.3 of the agreement establishing the African Development Bank mandates all member states to grant officials and staff members of the bank the same treatment in respect of traveling facilities as is accorded by members to representatives, officials, employees, and officers of comparable rank of member countries, unquote. On the strength of this article, the boards of directors of the bank authorized the issuance of the AFDB Laissez-Passer by Resolution 13.70 of 27 October 1970, with the objective to facilitate movement of staff members while on official travel. On May 31st, 1990, the Board of Governors adopted Resolution B/BG/90/07, by which member countries were required to initiate and complete all necessary formalities to ensure the acceptance and recognition of the bank's laissez-passer as a valid travel document for use by bank traveling officials on bank business to and through member countries. All privileges, immunities, and facilities were to be extended to all holders of the bank's laissez-passer. All regional member countries accept the laissez-passer as a valid travel document, with majority of 41 such member states granting visa waivers to its holders. Non-regional member countries are yet to give full effect to the above referenced board resolutions. In an effort to make the AFDB laissez-passer internationally accepted and to ensure that it meets the security standards necessary to enable all member countries to accept it for use by staff on official travel to and through countries, the bank undertook to produce a biometric laissez-passer containing state-of-the-art security and technological features that meet the norms of the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, standards. In this regard, the bank applied for and obtained ICAO code XBA and has produced a biometric laissez-passer which includes the following security features: microchip embedded in the cover containing biographic information, photo, fingerprints, digital signature, nationality, name, etc. Random watermarks, microprint including deliberate errors, AFDB logo, and photo of the headquarters building in the background layers. AFDB randomly displayed on pages, UV characters on paper, and heat-sealable high-security laminate. In daylight, colors of AFDB logo change depending on the angle of view. UV reactive thread from top to bottom. Numbering conical laser perforation of the laissez-passer number on every page, starting on page 3 to the back cover. Small symbols, letters within a defined grid randomly. Well-designed elements arranged randomly are blurred to create a grayscale image. The new laissez-passer will ensure the bank's ability to accelerate the implementation and delivery of its transformation agenda via the high fives by offering quick access to member states, acceptability by governments, leading to easier travel and transit at airports, visa waivers for AFDB laissez-passer holders, and more travel security. To officially start the use of the new laissez-passer, may I invite the President of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Akinwumi Ayodele Adesina, and the Chairperson of the Board of Directors to be presented the new laissez-passer. Mr. President, as custodian of the African Development Bank travel documents, I hereby present to you the new laissez-passer, and for member countries to see that we've achieved their concerns in terms of security to enable the laissez-passer to be allowed as documents for travel into member countries. Now I will announce the showing of a short video on India-Africa relations.
Dear Africa, we are just like each other. Similar journey of civilization, similar beauty, similar people, similar resources, similar glorious past, similar struggle of freedom, similar strengths, similar spirit. And along with such striking similarities, our challenges too are similar, like empowerment of the poor, development of the middle class, nourishment of children, skill development of the youth, taking technology to the last mile, providing for primary and digital needs of the citizens. And as our Honorable Prime Minister has to say, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Together we stand, together we grow. It is our desire for development that has brought us on this common platform. Dear Africa, come, let us beat the odds together. It is challenging, undoubtedly, but it is not impossible. With small innovations in governance and leveraging technology, we in India have made it possible within no time. Thousands of villagers living in the dark till yesterday are now electrified and shining bright. Millions of small businessmen entangled in the vicious circle of daily interest have now received structured loans for their business. More than 20 million women suffering from hazardous firewood smoke have now received clean cooking fuel. Interestingly, in India, you can get a yearly life insurance cover for just 12 rupees, that is $0.2 US. Even the remotest farmer of India is today able to sell his produce online. Citizens get their rights without involvement of any middleman. The world's largest skill development program, Skill India, is empowering the youth on a large scale. Movements like Make in India are positioning the country on fast track of development. Sharing our experiences is just another way to say that we really want to be a partner in this journey of development. The African Development Bank Group has already charted the blueprint of development of Africa as a part of its 10-year strategy 2013 to 2022. The bank's high 5 priorities are Light Up and Power Africa, Industrialize Africa, Feed Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life for the people of Africa. As Mahatma Gandhi rightly said, the commerce between India and Africa will be of ideas and services. Be it trade or tourism, education, or entrepreneurship, best practices or good governance. In keeping with South African philosophy of Ubuntu, which says humanity for others, and also means I am what I am because of who we all are. We believe together we can make our similarities our strength and provide our people the unimaginable happiness. As Nelson Mandela once said, it always seems impossible until it's done. Let us together make it possible. Come, let's leave a mark on the world.
May I now invite the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, to deliver his opening address.
Your Excellencies, the Presidents of Benin and Senegal, Your Excellency, the Vice President of Côte d'Ivoire, President of the African Development Bank, Secretary General of the African Union, Commissioner of the African Union Commission, my cabinet colleague, Sri Arun Jaitley, Chief Minister of Gujarat, Sri Vijay Rupani, distinguished guests and brothers and sisters from Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered today in the state of Gujarat. The Gujarati flair for business is well known. Gujaratis are also famous for their love of Africa. As an Indian and a Gujarati, I'm very happy that this meeting is being held in India, and that too in Gujarat. India has had strong ties with Africa for centuries. Historically, communities from Western India, especially Gujarat, and the eastern coast of Africa have settled in each other's lands. The Siddhis of India are said to have come from East Africa. The Bohra communities in coastal Kenya date back to the 12th century. Vasco da Gama is said to have reached Calicut with the help of a Gujarati sailor from Malindi. The Daos of Gujarat took merchandise in both directions. Ancient links between societies have also enriched our culture. The rich Swahili language includes many Hindi words. During the colonial era, 32,000 Indians came to Kenya to build the iconic Mombasa-Uganda railway. Many lost their lives during this railway construction. Around 6,000 of them stayed back and brought their families. Many of them started small businesses called dukas and came to be known as dukawalas. આપણે ત્યાં દુકાન કહે ને એને ત્યાં દુકા જ કહે છે. During the colonial years, merchants, artisans, and later officials, teachers, doctors, and other professionals went to East and West Africa, creating a vibrant community which combines the best of India and Africa. Mahatma Gandhi, another Gujarati, perfected his tools of non-violence struggle in South Africa. He also visited Tanzania in 1912 along with Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Several leaders of Indian origin supported strongly and fought alongside the leaders of Africa's struggles for independence, including Mr. Nyerere, Mr. Kenyatta, and Nelson Mandela. After the freedom struggle, several leaders of Indian origin were also appointed in the cabinets of Tanzania and South Africa. There are at least 6 Tanzanians of Indian origin who are now serving as members of parliament in Tanzania. The trade union movement of East Africa was started by Makhan Singh. It was during the trade union meetings that the first call of Kenyan independence was sounded. M.A. Desai and Piogama Pinto participated actively in Kenya's independence struggle. The then Prime Minister sent an Indian member of Parliament, Diwan Chamanlal, to be part of Kenyatta's defense team when the latter was imprisoned and tried during the Kapenguria trial in 1953. The defense team included 2 other persons of Indian origin. India was steadfast in its support for Africa's freedom. Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, "India came to our aid. India came to our aid when the rest of the world stood by or gave succor to our oppressors. When the doors of international councils were closed, India opened the way. You took up our battles as if they were your own," unquote. Over decades, our ties have become stronger. After assuming office in 2014, I have made Africa a top priority for India's foreign and economic policy. The year 2015 was a watershed. The third India-Africa summit held that year was attended by all 54 African countries having diplomatic relations with India. A record 41 African countries participated at the level of heads of the state or a government. Since 2015, I have visited 6 African countries: South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, Mauritius, and Seychelles. Our president had visited 3 countries: Namibia, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. The vice president visited 7 countries: Morocco, Tunisia, Nigeria, Mali, Algeria, Rwanda, and Uganda. I am proud to say that there is no country in Africa that has not been visited by an Indian minister in the last 3 years. Friends, from a time when we mainly had mercantile and maritime links between Mombasa and Mumbai, we have today this annual meeting which connects Abidozo and Ahmedabad. Business links between Bamako and Bangalore. Cricketing links between Chennai and Cape Town. Development links between Delhi and Dakar. This brings me to our development cooperation. India's partnership with Africa is based on a model of cooperation which is responsive to the needs of African countries. It is demand-driven and free of conditions. As one plank of this cooperation, India extends lines of credit through India's Exim Bank. 152 credits have been extended to 44 countries for a total amount of nearly $8 billion. During the third India-Africa Forum Summit, India offered $10 billion for development projects over the next 5 years. We also offered grant assistance of $600 million. India is proud of its educational and technical ties with Africa. 13 current former presidents, prime ministers, and vice presidents in Africa have attended educational or training institutions in India. 6 current or former chief of armed forces in Africa trained in India's military institutions. 2 current ministers of the Interior have attended Indian institutions. Under the popular India Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, more than 33,000 scholarships have been offered to officials from African countries since 2007. One of our best partnerships in the area of skills is the training of solar mamas. Every year, 80 African women are trained in India to work on solar panels and circuits. After the training, they go back and literally electrify their communities. Each woman is responsible for electrifying 50 houses in her community on return. And you'll be surprised. A necessary condition for the women to be selected is that they be illiterate or semi-literate. They also learn several other skills like basket making, beekeeping, and kitchen gardening during their stay. We have successfully completed the Pan-Africa e-network project for telemedicine and telenetwork covering 48 African countries. 5 leading universities in India offered certificate, undergraduate, and postgraduate programs. 12 super specialty hospitals offered consultations and continuous medical education. Around 7,000 students have concluded their studies. We will soon launch the next phase. We will soon successfully complete the Cotton Technical Assistance Program for our African countries launched in 2012. The project was implemented in Benin, Burkina Faso, Chad, Malawi, Nigeria, and Uganda. Friends, Africa-India trade has multiplied in the last 15 years. It has doubled in the last 5 years to reach nearly $72 billion in 2014-15. India's commodity trade with Africa in 2015-16 was higher than our commodity trade with the United States of America. India is also working with United States and Japan to support development in Africa. I gladly recall my detailed conversation with Prime Minister Abe during my visit to Tokyo, Japan. We discussed our commitment for enhancing growth prospects for all. In our joint declaration, we mentioned an Asia-Africa growth corridor and proposed further conversations with our brothers and sisters from Africa. Indian and Japanese research institutions have come up with a vision document. I congratulate RIS, ERIA, and IDE JETRO for their efforts in putting it together. This was done in consultation with think tanks from Africa. I understand the vision document would be presented at the board meeting later. The idea is that India and Japan with other willing partners, would explore joint initiatives in skills, health, infrastructure, manufacturing, and connectivity. Our partnership is not confined to governments alone. India's private sector is at the forefront of driving this impetus. From 1996 to 2016, Africa accounted for nearly 1/5 of Indian overseas direct investments. India is the 5th largest country investing in the continent, with investments over the past 20 years amounting $54 billion, creating jobs for Africans. We are encouraged by the response of African countries to the International Solar Alliance initiative, which was launched at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris in November 2015. The alliance is conceived as a coalition of countries rich in solar resources to address their spatial energy needs. I am happy to note that the many African countries have supported this initiative. As a founder of the new development bank, popularly called the BRICS Bank, India has consistently supported establishment of a regional center in South Africa. This will provide a platform to promote collaboration between NDB and other development partners, including African Development Bank. India joined the African Development Fund in 1982 and the African Development Bank in 1983. India has contributed to all of the bank's general capital increases. For the most recent African Development Fund replacement, India pledged $29 million. We have contributed to the highly indebted poor countries and multilateral debt reduction initiatives. On the sidelines of these meetings, the government of India is organizing a conference and dialogue in partnership with the Confederation of Indian Industry. There is also an exhibition in association with the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. The focus areas range from agriculture to innovation and startups and other themes. The theme of this event is transforming agriculture for wealth creation in Africa. This is an area where India and the bank can fruitfully join hands. I have already mentioned the Cotton Technical Assistance Program. Here in India, I have launched an initiative to double farmers' incomes by 2022. It will require concerted steps ranging from improved seeds and optimal inputs to reduce crop losses and better marketing infrastructure. India is keen to learn from your experiences as we proceed on this initiative. My African brothers and sisters, many of the challenges we face are the same. Uplifting our farmers and the poor, empowering women, ensuring our rural communities have access to finance, building infrastructure. We have to do this within financial constraints. We have to maintain macroeconomic stability so that inflation is controlled and our balance of payments is stable. There is much for us to gain by sharing our experiences on all these fronts. For example, in our push to a less cash economy, we have learned from the great strides that African countries like Kenya have made in the area of mobile banking, M-Paisa. I'm happy to share that India has, in the last 3 years, improved on all macroeconomic indicators. The fiscal deficit, balance of payments deficit, and inflation are down. The GDP growth rate, foreign exchange reserves, and public capital investments are up. At the same time, we have made big strides in development. Mr. President of the African Development Bank, it is reported that you have described our recent stamps as textbook chapter for other developing nations and called us a development beacon. While thanking you for these kind words, I'm also glad to know that you have spent quite some time training in Hyderabad earlier. However, I must say that I remain focused on the many challenges ahead. In that context, I thought I could share with you some of the strategies we have used in the last 3 years. By paying subsidies directly to the poor rather than indirectly through price concessions, we have achieved large fiscal savings. In cooking gas alone, we have saved over $4 billion in 3 years. In addition, I appeal to well-off citizens to voluntarily give up their gas subsidy. Under the Give It Up campaign, we promise the saving would be used to provide a connection to a poor family. You will be surprised to know that over 10 million Indians volunteered to do so. Thanks to the savings, we have launched a program to provide gas connection to 50 million poor families. More than 15 million connections have already been provided. This transforms the lives of the rural women. It frees them from the health hazards of cooking with firewood. It also protects the environment and reduces pollution. It is an example of what I call reform to transform, a concentrated set of actions which transforms lives. Some of the subsidized urea fertilizer intended for farmers used to get illegally diverted to non-agriculture uses like production of chemicals. We introduced universal neem coating urea. This makes the fertilizer unsuitable for diversion. Not only have we got substantial financial savings, but in addition, the studies have shown that neem coating has improved the effectiveness of the fertilizer. We are also providing our farmers with soil health cards which tell them the exact nature of their soil and advise on the best mix of inputs. This promotes optimal use of inputs and increased crop yield. We have made unprecedented increase in capital investment in infrastructure covering railways, highways, power and gas pipelines. By next year, no village in India will be without electricity. Our clean Ganga, renewable energy, digital India, smart cities, housing for all, and Skill India missions are preparing us for a cleaner, more prosperous, faster growing, and modern new India. Our aim is that India must be an engine of growth as well as an example in climate-friendly development in the years to come. There are two crucial factors which have helped us. The first set of changes is in the banking system. In the last 3 years, we have achieved universal banking. We launched the Jan Dhan Yojana for people's money campaign, under which our 280 million bank accounts have been opened for the poor in urban rural areas. Thanks to the initiative, virtually every Indian family has a bank account. Normally, banks are associated with helping businesses and the rich. We have enlisted them for helping the poor in their quest for development. We have strengthened our state-owned banks by freeing them from political decisions and appointing professional chief executives on merit through a transparent selection process. Our universal biometric identification system, called Aadhaar, has been the second crucial element. It prevents claiming of benefits by those who are not eligible. It enables us to ensure that those who deserve government aid receive it with ease while excluding non-genuine claims. Friends, let me conclude by wishing you a very successful and productive annual meeting. In the sports arena, India cannot compete with Africa in long-distance running. But I can assure you that India will always stand with you, shoulder to shoulder, supporting you in the long and difficult race for a better future. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, I now have a great pleasure in officially declaring the annual meetings of the Board of Governors of the African Development Bank Group open. Thank you.
Would you please put one more round of applause for the Prime Minister? Thank you. This brings the opening ceremony to an official close, but I have some announcements to make. There will be a group photo at the platform over there. While those sitting on the dais will remain seated, we will invite the governors to proceed to the dais and the special guests with a pin to proceed to the dais, to the platform for photograph. And secondly, at 1 p.m., there will be a high-level opening lunch in honor of heads of state that will be taking place at 1 p.m. The lunch will be taking place at 1 p.m. in honor of heads of states. Participants to this luncheon would have received invitation cards. May I therefore invite the governors and the special guests specifically identified to join the photograph on the platform, and you will be led. Please.
क्या करूं? हाँ हाँ Ladies and gentlemen, refreshments have been arranged for the participants near the silver and gold entry. Thank you.